Hello and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here with this week's Mermazing Monday project. And this is also my project for the new Cupcake Inspirations challenge and is a celebration challenge. So we have lots of prizes and I will talk about that a little bit more later. But first I'll tell you what I'm doing. I had so much fun with the mixed media project that I did the other day that I decided I would make another mixed media card for this project. And I'm starting with just a piece of netting that I had in my stash that's white. I didn't want it to be white though, so I thought I would colour it up with my watercolour paints. These are Gansai Tambi watercolour paints in various shades of blue. If you have re-inkers for dye inks, that would probably be a good way to do that as well, but I did not, so I worked with these. And I just used, as I said, various shades of blue and kind of smushed them around on the netting. And then I did kind of wrinkle it through and mix it all up, which actually mixed all the colours. And that wasn't quite the effect I was going for, but never mind. I then dried it with the cooler setting of my WOW dual speed heat gun and just carefully moved back and forwards over it, trying not to hold the heat in one place for too long because I didn't want to burn it, because it's kind of a plasticky material that this is made of, and of course that could melt if I put too much heat on it. I then put it back down on my craft mat and picked up some more of the paint that was already there and put in some more of the lightest colour and the darkest colour just to get a bit extra texture into the colour of the netting. Then I put it into my splat box again and again dried off with my heat gun. I couldn't quite work out why it was warping so much this time, but I decided to go with it. I thought it added some interesting texture. When I turned off my heat gun, I realised it was because I had it on the hotter setting, so do make sure to pay attention to what setting you have it on. But it worked out in the end. I have a lot of paint left on my craft mat, so I have some little chipboard hexagons that I die cut and I'm going to be using on my card, and I thought I'd dip them into the paint to add a base layer of colour to those. I then also bought in just a large snippet of watercolour paper and used that to pick up some of the colour as well, and I think I'll probably end up using that on next week's Mermazing Monday, but we shall wait and see about that. So next I want to add more detail to my hexagons. I did make sure the paint on them had dried fully, and then I have this open weave fishnet rubber stamp from Blank Page Muse. I inked it up with Stormy Sky Distress Oxide and pressed all three of the hexagons onto that. And the colour was a little intense, so I just used my sponge from my blending tool to knock that back a bit. I then cleaned off the stamp and I'm going to this time do kind of partial stamping with Mermaid Lagoon and layer that up on top. And again use my sponge just to knock the brightness back a little. Then I'm going to be doing the tissue paper embossing technique, which I also did on my mixed media card last week, and I really enjoyed how it looked. And when this mermaid card idea came into my head, this was like one of the main features of it, so of course I had to do that. So I've put some craft tacky glue onto one of the hexagons. I'm screwing up my piece of tissue paper and then flattening it back out, and this gives some nice texture. I'll then press it onto that glue and just kind of smush it around and squish and wrinkle it up a bit more on the hexagon. I'll then tear off the overhanging pieces. I think this would be easier if the glue has been allowed to dry before you tear it off, because otherwise it's kind of moving as you're tearing, which is a bit of a pain. But I was trying to use the same little piece of tissue paper on all three of my hexagons, even though I had a mountain of this tissue paper, as you saw. So I really didn't need to do that. It just was making my life more difficult, which I seem to do quite a lot. So whilst I'm finishing putting those on the other two, I'll talk a little bit about the Cupcake Inspiration Challenge. I've been on this design team for 2 years, so you might have seen me creating for it before. I don't always do videos for it, but if you follow me on the blog, over on my blog, you definitely will have seen these projects. So it's now our 500th challenge, and we are having a huge celebration. We have prizes. We have, I think, 13 sponsors and 16 total prizes up for grabs, and all of them added up, it's over $200 worth of prizes that you could potentially win. All you have to do is come and link up with the challenge with a birthday themed project and you will be entered into the draw. So I will have a link to the challenge down in the description box below. We on the design team are each going to be sharing cards daily featuring some of the different sponsors we have. We're not featuring a specific sponsor on the launch post, but I did want to use a lawn fawn stamp as they are one of our sponsors. And as I said, I'll be sharing projects with some of the other sponsors' products in the coming days, but I probably won't be making videos for them just because that would be a lot of work to do, and I don't know that I'd have enough time for that. So back to the card. Whilst I was talking, you saw I added embossing ink and Glassy Ocean embossing powder to those hexagons. Mostly just putting the embossing powder on the area that the tissue paper was. There was perhaps a little spillover area, but I did leave some of it not embossed, and that was intentional. When I did this technique last week, I used a sponge dauber to apply the ink, but this time I just added it on directly by pressing them into the ink pad, and I think that was actually easier. I then pulled in some wooden elements. I think these were from a Love from Lizzie card kit or mega pack or something, one of the very first ones I ever got. As I did with the hexagons, I want to heat emboss these. I was thinking about doing different colours and kind of drawing on the embossing ink with an embossing pen that I have, but then I decided just to do all three of them. I'll only show one on screen, but I decided to do all three of them with the Sparkling Sands embossing powder, which is again a WOW embossing powder and actually comes in the same trio as the Glassy Ocean powder that I used on the background. I did colour and fussy cut my mermaid off screen because this video is long enough without having the colouring in it as well. So that was all my focal elements ready, but when I put them on the card base I decided it didn't look quite right. I want this to be still quite clean because I do prefer a clean design generally speaking, but it felt too clean. So I first added some wave design, a kind of abstract wave, and this is from Simon Says Stamps See You Soon stamp set. I stamped 3 lines of those so that they would be about behind where the hexagons will be, and I stamped them with Aquatini ink doing its second generation so it wouldn't be too intense. Next I wanted to add some splatter to my card base, and I thought it would be fun if some of the splatters would be heat embossed. So to do this I scribbled an embossing pen onto my acrylic block, mixed in a little water and splattered that onto the card base. It didn't work quite as well as I would have liked. I think really I should have just used the embossing pad directly on the acrylic block, but for whatever reason I didn't think of that. I also got a lot of the glitter stuck on the card base, so I brushed that off with a little paintbrush, switched to dotting some extra fake splatters directly with the embossing pen, and then heat embossed that in the Sparkling Sand ink. And then I also added some more splatters with the Aquatini ink from Catherine Pooler. Most of this is going to be covered up by my netting and my little hexagons, but it does just add a little extra detail. For my sentiment, I bought in one from another Simon Says stamp set, which was Beautiful Mermaids, and I will have all the products I've used linked in the description box below, and those will be affiliate links where possible. That just helps to support the channel at no extra cost to you. I stamped that with Versafine Onyx Black ink and then started assembling my card. I want to make sure that those wooden pieces are going to stick down really well on the textured surface of the hexagons, so I used Glossy Accent because that's a nice strong glue, and then put an acrylic block on them to help them stay in place. I then put double-sided tape onto the back of each hexagon, just one strip, and pushed that onto the netting, kind of scrunching it up so that the netting would have some texture. And whilst this is currently on my card base, I'm not trying to stick it to the card base at that point. I just want it to attach to the netting. I then flipped it over and added more double-sided tape onto the netting, pressing it so that hopefully it would stick through to the hexagons as well, just for some extra hold. It was a bit tricky to peel off the backing, so I did use my reverse tweezers there because the tape was trying to lift up from the netting a bit. And then just for even more security, I'm going to again use my glossy accents on the back of the hexagons. And that did allow me a little bit of wiggle room to get the netting crumpled nicely and also slide the hexagons so that the positioning was exactly how I wanted them. At that point my seahorse fell off, so I had to reapply that. I trimmed off the excess piece of netting that was overhanging the edge of my card, and I decided I wanted to add some of that behind the mermaid just to be a little bit of a buffer between her and the hexagons. So I thought I would cut that into another hexagon shape. So I placed it behind the negative of where I die cut my chipboard hexagons from, and then I could use the same shape. I could have just run it through my die cutting machine probably, but this worked easily enough. I just used my craft knife and then just trimmed away any bits that hadn't quite cut through with my scissors. Just like I did with attaching the hexagons to the netting, I'm going to use some double-sided tape to attach it to my mermaid, and I did crumple it a little bit for some extra texture. Before I stick her down, I decided to trim away some of the netting on my card base and put some kind of ripped looking areas into it, just to make it look a bit more weathered. And when I was completely happy with that, I moved on to adhering my mermaid, and I used foam tape for this. I went with 2 layers of foam tape because I wanted her to pop up higher than the other embellishments on the card because she is kind of the focal point of the card. I actually do really like how it looks without the mermaid, but of course this is Mermazing Monday and I wanted to be including a lawn fawn stamp, so I really did need to have the mermaid in there. But I'd love to know what you think, whether it would have been better without the mermaid perhaps. I suppose it depends who you're giving it to. You could do the same design without the mermaid and it would work as a masculine card. With the mermaid, maybe not so much, but that depends on the man. If he likes mermaids, then he can have a mermaid card. I do hope you enjoyed this video and perhaps learned something new. If you did, you could press the like button and leave a comment to let me know. Don't forget to head over to Cupcake Inspirations to join in with our challenge, and also you can click the Mermazing Monday hashtag above my title or in my description box to see more mermaid inspiration. If you're not yet a subscriber, you can subscribe by clicking the button on screen. Also press the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a new video. There are a couple of other videos showing on screen if you'd like to see more from me straight away. Otherwise, I'll thank you very much for watching and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!